One man is dead and another is missing. They have something in common. Both had slept with Kelly Cochran.
Outside of work, he didn't go anywhere with her. They had just, I guess, a sex-arranged relationship.
Detectives were about to delve into a bizarre world of easy sex and a pact to kill being played out in the wilderness by a Great Lake.
He begged her nonstop to stay home, be his wife, stop having affairs, and she just continued to belittle him.
If one of them, Jason or Kelly, ever had an affair and the other person found out, the plan would be both spouses would kill the person the spouse was having an affair with.
Detectives gather evidence until a picture of a suspect emerges. Which piece of the puzzle will reveal Kelly Cochran as guilty of murder? What would be the killer's mistake? In 2016, an Indiana cop decides to make up a story, one which might reveal the truth about a woman called Kelly Cochran and her late husband, Jason.
I had jotted down on my notes this idea of creating a fictitious letter that Jason Cochran had made up prior to his death in the event of his death. So I was like throwing this idea around on paper, and I was also throwing around the idea of Walt Ammerman presenting this idea on my behalf as a confidential informant.
He said, I have an idea, and I want you to call her on a recorded call, and I'd like you to tell her that Jason mailed you a letter a while back and wanted you to hold on to it in case something ever happened to him.
And honestly, my first thought was, this is never gonna work. You know, she is too smart. She knows everyone's looking at her closely right now, especially with her husband dying. There is no way she's gonna fall for this, but I was willing to try anything.
Agreement reached between detectives and a willing citizen. A murder suspect gets a call.
I just said I had this letter that Jason mailed me and told me to hold on to another letter, and said if anything ever happened to him, I needed to send this on to the police in the Upper Peninsula.
The sting had been set up to get to the truth about what two people, Jason and Kelly Cochran, had got up to shortly after moving from Indiana to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan.
They were just looking for new opportunities, is my understanding. It's a beautiful area. I'm not familiar with the part of Indiana that they're from. I've been told it's not the greatest area in the world. And I think they were just looking to get a fresh start and came to an area that they thought they could get a fresh start at.
For 2 years, a man called Chris Reagan had been missing and was thought to be somewhere out in the Upper Peninsula. He had simply disappeared. Dead or alive, he was proving hard to find.
Working in those really austere environments, sometimes we have to bike or ski or hike for a day or two or three before we can even get into the area where we're investigating or looking for a missing person, or you have to fly in or take a helicopter, and those are extremely difficult cases to work, very expensive.
The Upper Peninsula of Michigan is very, I don't want to say desolate, but in a sense it is compared to where most people live. There's a lot of open land, not a lot of industry up there anymore. So you could drive for miles and miles and not see any kind of business or come into any towns.
There are plenty of places to bury a body out here, or to find yourself in trouble with no one near to help. Terry O'Donnell went looking for her former boyfriend Chris Reagan when he went missing.
I searched those woods, thinking maybe he parked there, he had problems with the car, and something happened to him in the woods.
On October 27th of 2014, I met Terry O'Donnell, who came to the police department as I was leaving for the day. She was shook up, she was crying. That's when she told me that something was wrong, her friend was missing. She came into the office and explained to me what she had found. She hadn't heard from him since October 14th. And then one of his coworkers spotted his vehicle parked in a park and ride just east of Iron River. You know, there were other details. She went to his apartment, things didn't look right there. So, you know, she had concern that something bad had happened to him.
Terry and Chris were just friends, but had been really close. Childhood sweethearts, their lives had gone in different directions. Marriages, children, and divorces later, they got back together.
And so we met up and wined and dined and just had a wonderful time and just started dating again. Yeah, it was awesome. It was wonderful. When Chris would look at me, I just melt. I mean, he just had that he was charismatic, and he just made you feel like you were everything. You know, that you were the only person in the room when he looked at you. Apparently Chris, you know, made a trip to Iron River to visit Terry, fell in love with the area, wanted to change. You know, Chris being an avid outdoorsman, he loved it up there. So he interviewed for a job while he was in town visiting her. He got the position and immediately moved up there with her. And I kept telling him, we're not living here. Don't look for a job here. Look for a job in Marquette or Appleton, somewhere bigger. And he didn't. He found work here in Iron River. He was not supposed to be here. We were not supposed to be in Iron River. And we ended up here. He and Terry, their relationship turned more into just a friendship. They didn't really have the same ideas about their futures, but they remained very good friends.
Chief Frizzo is being diplomatic. Terry had ended their relationship after Chris had made a revelation about his sex life. Christopher
had an issue with pornography that I found out when him and I started talking more about why he needed a little bit more alone time. And he was hooked on things on the internet, and I didn't agree with that. And that's why we broke up. I still loved him. And maybe that's why, you know, we stayed friends. I kept in touch with him. He would still call or text, but we couldn't date. We couldn't be a couple because it just wasn't right. At least for me, that wasn't right.
Chris was working at a place called Lake Shore, where he had kept a lot more secret than an addiction to pornography.
You know, Chris, he didn't really have a lot of friends there, just a couple people that he really, you know, would associate with. And there was a woman that he was allegedly having an affair with.
And so people told me that, you know, there were rumors at Lake Shore that he was hooking up with Kelly Cochran. I was just astonished, to be honest, that Christopher had like this second life.
A second life with a woman who, together with her husband Jason, had a colourful attitude to relationships altogether. Her name, Kelly Cochran.
Kelly talked about the affair she was having with Chris and how Jason was aware of it and he was okay with it, that they had an open marriage. But Jason, on the other hand, it bothered him, but he was afraid of losing his wife, so he tried to allow her to basically live her life and not interfere with it. But it was clearly driving him crazy.
I would say that their marriage was controlled by Kelly. Their lives together were controlled by her. She did all the cooking, the financing, everything, the grocery shopping. He didn't really do much of anything. He just did what he could to keep her happy.
You know, she was very emotionally abusive to him. He begged her nonstop to stay home, be his wife, stop having affairs, and she just continued to belittle him.
Obviously, she wasn't happy in her marriage as she was engaging in extramarital affairs. I did talk to her family members and got what information they had about Jason. And of course, I gleaned what information I could about Jason and his relationship with Kelly from some of his own words and some of the statements that he made in his while being evaluated for some mental health issues, and in the writings that he had, which were, quite frankly, very disturbing and and kind of made you wonder what kind of person this really was.
I was having dinner with Jason and Kelly at a restaurant there in their town, and oddly, she asked him, "Did you show Walt our friend?" I had no idea what she was talking about, and he showed me a picture of a half-naked woman on his phone, and Kelly said, "Yeah, I found a friend for Jason and I because I love him so much that I wanted to keep him happy." And that threw me for a loop.
And then Walt learns of the wedding day vow tacked on to the standard marriage ceremony by Jason and Kelly.
Kelly's story is they agreed on their wedding night that if either of them ever cheated, they got to kill that person.
The story of the marriage pact came from Kelly's words herself. Was it true? Was it not true? I think only Kelly and Jason will know. It allegedly was said on their wedding night, and I don't think anyone was really privy to what was going on there besides the two of them.
If it was true, had Chris Reagan picked the wrong woman with whom to have an affair?
I think Kelly's very smart, and she's very manipulative, and I think everything that she said and did was because she was, hiding, covering her tracks.
The helicopter view of the life and times of 4 people living their lives in the Iron River area of the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, was set up for trouble by the autumn of 2014. Terry O'Donnell had found everything too bizarre to stay involved with the porn-addicted Chris Reagan. Chris had admitted to an affair with the allegedly abusive Kelly Cochran, and Jason Cochran could rely on a wedding day vow to kill anyone who fooled around with his wife. On October the 14th, Chris got a call from Kelly.
Kelly Cochran lured Christopher Reagan to her house. She lured him with the promise of a great dinner, lasagna, and perhaps a little something on the side. With that, Christopher Reagan, he set off. He had to draw a map to remind himself how to get to Kelly's house. In the meantime, on his way over there, he had been talking to his ex-girlfriend. They were still very good friends. She was excited for him because the very next day, Chris was going to start his new life, a new job in the Carolinas.
For his new job, he had to have a physical, and actually, that's the last day I spoke to him. It was October 14th, 2014. That morning, it was about 6 a.m. in the morning, he called me and told me that he was going to be going to Marshfield the next day. That was the last time I talked to him. That was the last time I heard from him, was that morning.
Terry called round to help Chris pack, as arranged. He was not at his apartment.
I kept texting, messaging him, and I got no response. And normally he would respond immediately, or when he would have a break if he was at work.
I mean, she knew that he was going somewhere that night, but where is he? Why wouldn't he show up for his job, and why wouldn't he say a last goodbye to her?
And a week went by and I still hadn't heard from him, and I was talking to people at work, and I was, what should I do? I can't get a hold of him. And I went up to the apartment, knocked on the door, there was no one there. And everyone told me that I was being paranoid and that I should just, relax, we weren't dating, and maybe he, found someone else.
On October 27th of 2014, I met Terry O'Donnell, who came to the police department as I was leaving for the day. She was shook up, she was crying. That's when she told me that something was wrong, her friend was missing. She came into the office and explained to me what she had found. She hadn't heard from him since October 14th.
Terry had found Chris's car, and inside it was a post-it note with a map on it.
And there was a sticky note on the passenger seat, and it had directions written on it. I said, this is the last place he was. This is wherever this note
wherever these directions go to on this note, that's the last place he ever was.
You know, and I just remember her saying, I can't make heads or tails of these directions.
They were directions to Kelly Cochran's home in Old Caspian. That was the last place he was.
So immediately, I've got some red flags.
Iron County cops were dispatched to the address that a discarded note in his car had suggested, the home of Kelly and Jason Cochran.
She said when they went to the door, they asked for Kelly. They were met by Jason Cochran, who seemed irritated and told them that Kelly was not there. The trooper had noticed a silhouette in the upper window upstairs of the residence and actually made mention of that to the sergeant, saying there's somebody upstairs. And as they're talking to Jason, Kelly presents herself. So they talk to her outside. She admits that she was having an affair with Chris. She admits that she knew he was supposed to have shown up for a medical appointment for his new job, but she claims that she hadn't seen him since, around the 12th, 13th of October.
And when they ask Kelly about her relationship with Christopher, she refers to him in the past tense. They haven't said anything that he's murdered or that he's missing. She's already referring to him in the past tense.
The first thing I did when I found out about Kelly Cochran and Christopher having this affair with her, I Googled her and her husband so I could see what they look like. And I'm glad I did, because I was afraid. I didn't know what happened to Chris, and in my mind he was killed, and they were the last people to see him, and in my mind they did it, and I didn't have any doubt.
What she tells them, again, goes in direct contradiction from what they already know. She claims she hasn't seen him in a couple of weeks, and the police know it's only been a couple of days. So she's speaking in past tense, couple of weeks, and it's only been a couple of days.
Having suspicions is one thing, proving something is another.
They went around town like nothing happened. The detectives interviewed Kelly and Jason, and they acted like nothing happened. Kelly said, "Oh, I stopped by and he wasn't home. I didn't know where he was."
There was no evidence of any foul play related to Chris Reagan's sudden disappearance. As days turned into weeks, Chief of Iron River Police Frizzo knew she needed help in searching for Chris. There was no shortage of volunteers.
I get a phone call from Mike Niger. Mike Niger calls and says, I'm retired from the state police. He gives me his whole background, tells me how he wants to help me at no cost to me, which was huge because, we don't have a lot of finances in our department, and I'll take all the help I can get.
So did a lot of searching for her right away. I came over and just rechecked the area around the park and ride where the car was found, looking for evidence and, Chris anywhere in that area.
I kept looking and searching for Christopher. I would walk in the woods. I would walk back behind Cochran's home, trying to find something. And they had a big dog. I'd hear a dog bark. It'd scare me. I was afraid if Kelly ever found out that I was the one who missed Christopher, that I was the one that reported him missing. I was afraid her husband might come looking for me.
Of course, at this stage, it was still possible that Chris had had an accident.
Iron County is a very rugged area. It's a historic area with a lot of old mining. So we have a lot of old mines and mining relics. And we have a lot of caving grounds where old mine shafts and stuff have caved in, and then they filled in with water.
Well, when I first heard about this case would have been around the time that Mr. Reagan disappeared in the fall of 2014. It was big news in the area. In fact, we'd had a couple other people that had just kind of vanished for various other reasons. And that was something that the local media had picked up on, and something that I kept an eye on, wondering what had happened to this individual. You know, a lot of things happen in the woods around here. People go hiking and sometimes trip or fall or have heart attacks in the woods, so you really don't know what happened.
Many thought that Chris could have had an accident or simply left without telling anyone, something Laura Frizzo considered.
He doesn't want to be found.
Terry wasn't buying that.
Christopher had went to Kelly Cochran's house October 14th that night, and I wonder why he went there. Kelly has said several things, you know, like he went there for sex or she had drugs for him. And I think, why this time would he go to her apartment or her house? He had never been there before. So why now? He knew Jason. He knew Kelly's husband was in Iron River. Kelly always went to his place. Why would Christopher go to that house?
6 months after he had disappeared, at last presumed to be at Kelly's house, Iron Mountain police get permission to search the Cochran household.
When that search warrant is done for the day, it's like 10 o'clock at night, and we leave there, and the following morning, Kelly and Jason Cochran take off. They completely leave, taking just what they could fit in their truck, and would never return to Michigan.
They vanished. They left in the middle of the night and went back to Indiana, where they had originally come from. And so as quick as they showed up, they left again.
And what evidence had turned up from the forensic search of their home?
They collected a lot of evidence, and we got nothing from that evidence, nothing to establish Chris Reagan was in that residence. And I remember that moment because I was so sure. You know, I had these big binders, these big books of my case sitting on the back table, and I got off the phone and I just wanted to take them and toss them out the window because I was so frustrated.
So Jason and Kelly were on the road, and the mystery of Chris Reagan's whereabouts remained. Was his body somewhere out in the woods? By April 2016, the Cochrans, now living with Jason's parents in Hobart, Indiana, were back in touch with their online gaming friend, Walt Ackerman. He was wondering why they'd disappeared from the scene.
I didn't hear from him for close to a month. And I guess it always bugged me that as soon as he called me, he told me that they just got their phones and computers back because the police had took them, and they think they're responsible for a person who's missing.
February 20th, 2016, and in Hobart, Indiana, emergency medical services get a call from a woman called Kelly Cochran. Her husband, Jason, had died. She thought that he had taken an overdose of heroin. Walt gets a call too.
So there was a phone call on February 20th, Kelly contacting me to say that Jason had died that night, and immediately my wife told me, well, she did it. And I wasn't really buying that yet. And over the weekend, she was very adamant about the fact that I needed to contact somebody in law enforcement in the Upper Peninsula and tell them that Jason was dead, because it's not even the same state where he died in. And she knew enough about the law to know that they needed to know. So I contacted the FBI and I said I knew Jason and Kelly very good, and they had told me that they were being looked at for this person missing. They have not told me anything about the fact that they did it or anything like that, but I feel that I needed to let you know that one of them died on Saturday, and this is Monday. And right away the guy said, how did Jason die? I said, I didn't even tell you it was Jason. He said, if one of them died, it was Jason. And we need to get on that.
I answered a phone call from the FBI tip line, and they said that they had received an anonymous call, and that we needed to take a closer look at Jason Cochran's death. They said that, it was a possibility that Jason Cochran and Kelly Cochran had been involved in a missing persons case, and that, they had fled to Hobart, Indiana.
And it was within the hour they had the autopsy postponed for that day until the following day so they could get the police there to take part in this autopsy because they understood the importance of it.
The autopsy findings make it clear Jason's was no accidental death. He had died of asphyxia due to strangulation that was complicated by heroin intoxication. A murder investigation is launched.
And I get a call from a detective in Indiana who tells me that Jason Cochran's dead.
2 men dead in 2 states. The common denominator, Kelly Cochran. Her husband Jason was a drug user who had been murdered. As for Chris Reagan, he had now been missing for nearly 2 years. He had a former wife, Terry O'Donnell, and 2 sons who had not heard a word from him.
There was no way that I was ever going to have peace until, I could figure it out. And not only that, but I felt like, I need to give closure to his boys, his family.
Now leading a murder investigation in Indiana, Detective Jeremy Ogden spots the importance of the disappearance of Chris Reagan to the case.
I contacted Chief Frizzo, and she said, I can't believe this has happened. And, she was just, you could tell she was happy that something had occurred. She wasn't happy that somebody was dead, but she was happy that there maybe new life was being put into what she was doing.
It was a relief to me to hear, his thoughts on some of these things because they were my thoughts. It was exactly how I thought. And I had not worked with anyone at that point yet that was on the same track I was. So it was a huge relief.
I was very touched right out of the gate by the whole situation with Chris Reagan. By that time, I had had really good conversations with Laura, and Laura had explained to me, the kind of man that he was, and that he served his country for 20 years in the Navy, and, it was, it was important. It was important that somebody go the extra steps for somebody who had always gone and done the right thing for our country.
Ogden heads over with a police photographer to where Kelly was living and where Jason had died. His parents' home.
I'm here to investigate the death of your husband. I said, it's very uncommon for a man at 37 years of age to die, and that's why I'm here today. I kind of got it out there before she had even a reason to ask. And she says, are you here for any other reason? And I said, I don't understand the question. She said, did you come here for another reason? Did you come here to question me about something else? I said, should I be questioning you about something else? I go, this is becoming very odd for me. I said, I'm here to investigate your husband's death. I said, but am I supposed to talk to you about something else? And she says, no, I just was wanting to know, are you sure there's nothing else you came here to talk to me about? And I said, I didn't come here to talk to you about anything other than your husband's untimely death.
It was after Jason's funeral that Detective Ogden called in Kelly Cochran for questioning. A cat-and-mouse game over 2 states, involving teams of investigators and 2 dogged detectives, was about to begin, as the search was underway to find a killer's mistake.
You asked me if I was there to interview you about anything else. And I said, I really wouldn't be a good detective unless I found out what that other thing was. I said, so I know a little bit about that other thing. I said, but we're not going to talk about that today because I don't want to start a problem between you and I this way. And she kind of smiled and she said, if you want me to respect you at all, you'll just say it like it is. And I said, okay. I said, you know exactly what happened to Chris Reagan. And I said, by the time this is all done, you're going to tell me. And she just sat there and I said, there's no doubt in my mind, You know, I don't have any doubt at all. I 150% know that you know.
Every property where the Cochrans had been was meticulously searched and researched. The basement in their Upper Peninsula home retested forensically for signs of blood. Nothing found. Carpets were taken from the Indiana family home. Nothing conclusive. Hours of interviews between Cochran, Ogden and Chief Frizzo yielded no confession. Detective Ogden decided something creative was needed to get a breakthrough.
I had to find out where Christopher Reagan was disposed of in order for Kelly to confess to killing Jason. And I knew this from the very beginning. I knew that she would never confess to killing Jason unless I somehow got her to admit what happened to Chris Reagan.
Then he told me about his plan to, have this phone call made regarding this fictitious letter that Jason wrote, and he's telling me, we're going to have this friend of Jason's call and say, hey, we have this letter, and Jason told me to mail this out if anything should happen to him to the Iron River Police Department, and he gives me the whole scoop on it.
I had written a script for the letter, and Walt Ammerman was coming that day.
I was very apprehensive. I didn't really think she was going to believe it. He assured me that he could probably get a lawyer to do it in town, a local one, and say Jason contacted him, but he really felt that it would be more believable coming from me.
I sat down with Walt and his wife. I talked to Walt for all of about 5 minutes, and I said, you are the kind of man that every detective hopes walks into his case, and I need you to do something for me. I want you to be my confidential informant.
Really, the ball was in Jeremy's court, and not knowing him that well, but having that feeling that, he was doing the right thing, I just sat back and waited.
Ogden's plan was this. Walt would claim to have a letter given to him by Jason. Kelly Cochran would suspect that the letter would incriminate her in whatever had happened to Chris Reagan, and she would then confess in a plea bargain. Then she would reveal the truth of what had happened to her husband, Jason. Would the ruse work? Could detectives uncover a killer's mistake? A big moment had arrived in the case against Kelly Cochran. The disappearance of her former sex partner, Chris Reagan, last known to have been headed to her home in Iron County, Michigan, remained unsolved. The death of her husband, Jason, from a heroin overdose and asphyxiation had been designated as murder. To get her to confess, a fictitious letter had been dreamed up by investigator Jeremy Ogden, to be revealed by friend to Jason and Kelly Cochran, Walt Ackerman. The letter would imply Jason was going to tell police whatever had happened to Chris Reagan. It was April 2016.
If in the event something occurs to me, if I were to die, please forward this letter to the Iron River Police Department. Attention, Chief Laura Frizzo. Do not open the letter that's contained within this manila envelope, please. And I signed it Jason or whatever, and he said, okay, well, we have to make some changes.
They wanted me to just call her and tell her, but I needed to write it out because I needed to act like I was reading what Jason had wrote me. And if she wanted to hear it again, I wanted to read it exactly like I did the first time. So I wrote it out how I thought he would write it to me.
I said, okay, well, what do we need to change? And he said, well, he would never sign Jason to me. He would sign Quack Quack. He goes, that's what he always called himself to me. I said, okay, so we make it Quack Quack. So, we kind of fine-tuned the letter, and Walt added his 2 cents into it, made it very authentic, and he got on that phone, and it was incredible.
I'll never forget making that phone call. I'll never forget hearing her answer. I just said I had this letter that Jason mailed me and told me to hold on to another letter and said if anything ever happened to him, I needed to send this on to the police in the Upper Peninsula.
And as soon as he said, Jason had sent him this letter and that in the event something happens to him, to forward it to the Iron River Police Department. There's this huge gasp for air by her.
Her sigh and her cry and her please don't are 3 things I'll never forget. Please don't. If there was any doubt in my mind that she didn't have something to do with it, it was all erased at that moment.
Ultimately, she says, you know, do whatever you gotta do.
And within a minute, she totally flipped and was like, well, you gotta do what you gotta do.
And the next words are like, don't send it, don't do that, throw it away, whatever it is. But it's to get rid of it. Distance yourself from it, distance me from it, don't do this to me. And for those 30 seconds, it was like I had the biggest fish of a lifetime on.
I think that was the turning point for her to realize that she wanted to be a witness instead of a suspect. But she was never a witness. She was always the suspect, but I think Jeremy won that game.
And so, for me, the letter worked exactly as it should have, because it opened the door for future conversation about something she was unwilling to talk about. And all of these situations, you have to give them a reason to want to talk to you about this thing that no one else knows, and to share with you the secret that they've been hiding all this time.
In Iron Mountain, Michigan, Chief Laura Frizzo.
He just sent me an email, and I, of course, right away opened the email, and there's a copy of the recording in my email from this phone call. And I thought, obviously it didn't go well, because he would have called and told me. So I'm sitting in my, office, and I opened this recording, and when I listened to it, I just about fell off my chair. And I thought, he got her. If even for a minute, he got her.
Many hours of painstaking interviews later, Kelly Cochran's version of events is finally revealed.
It just got to a point where he was able to, make her vulnerable to the point that she finally told him. I mean, I remember Jeremy calling me and saying, well, she told me that, Jason shot Chris. She finally said, it happened in our house.
Her story was that she and Chris were making out at the top of the stairs when Jason had come across them, and then killed Chris with a single rifle shot to the head. So where was his body? When in Jason's parents' house, a brief conversation with Jason's father, Chet, gave the investigation team an idea of what had happened to Chris Reagan's body.
And Chet starts telling me in the interview that Jason would always talk to him about, he called it slicing and dicing, cutting people up and feeding them to the hogs. And if you fed them to the hogs, that nobody would ever be able to figure out what you did. And that he told him there was this prostitute one time that they talked about slicing and dicing her, but that he didn't have any direct information that this happened, but that these were conversations.
Chief Frizzo returns to the neighbors of the Cochrans to be told that those living nearby had heard power tools. They were being used on the early morning of the disappearance of Chris Reagan.
It's like 2:30 in the morning, and they can hear power tools running over at the Cochran residence, describing saws and everything else. And that was really the first time where I kind of sat back and thought, could they possibly have, dismembered this guy?
Kelly Cochran soon confirms the suspicions and agrees to take detectives to the woods where they had buried Chris's body parts.
And within 10 minutes of being there, locate Chris Reagan's skull. Another thing she showed us that day was where she threw the gun, which the Michigan State Police dive team did recover.
Kelly said that they buried him in different garbage bags, and only the skull was found. So the rest of him is there. The rest of him is still missing.
This may have appeared to be an open and shut case, but Kelly Cochran would have her day in court, and a lawyer, a good one.
So the main theme I had was Kelly was basically a liar. and Kelly was seeking attention, and that she would have said anything to get the attention that she wanted, and really there was no proof. There's no forensic evidence behind any of those stories.
The thing I'll never forget is her smirk. She just showed no emotion.
Defense was that there was really no evidence other than Kelly's word as to what happened here, and Kelly was a liar.
The hardest part, I think, was when they brought his skull out as evidence. Just listening to how things went down, luring him into their house. In my mind, how could anybody do that? That's all I kind of had in my mind. How could somebody be so ruthless?
But none were taken in by her defence. Kelly Cochran was found guilty of the murder of Chris Reagan, some believing that it had been motivated because of the wedding day pact entered into by the Cochrans.
Their marriage pact was that if one of them had an affair with somebody, they would kill that person, whether it be her or Jason. So if Jason had an affair, the person Jason had an affair with would get killed, and vice versa.
When the jury came back, we were obviously disappointed. Was it surprising? No. There were, again, the hundreds of hours of confessions, and the jury obviously believed that some version of that was true.
The moment the fictitious letter fooled Kelly Cochran into revealing that she was hiding the truth had led her to confess first to the murder of Chris Reagan and then of the murder of her husband.
Her story is she sat on Jason's chest and held her hands over his nose and mouth as he was trying to throw up from the heroin overdose that she gave him. She wanted him to see her and know that she did that, I think. And I can't wrap my head around that. I don't think any normal person can.
Back in Iron Mountain, the great outdoors still keeps its secrets. After the discovery of his skull, nothing else was found of the remains of Chris Reagan.
These are the woods where he was buried. I'm got shivers, not because of the cold, just because of where I am right now. When I came out here on October 14th for Chris's 5-year anniversary of his death, I just got chills, and I could feel him, and it was just real eerie. And knowing that he's still, parts of him are still not found.
In May 2017, Kelly Cochran was sentenced to life in prison without parole at a hearing in Iron County Court in Michigan. Cochran was found guilty of murder, larceny, conspiracy to commit dead bodies, concealing the death of an individual, and lying to a police officer. In May 2018, she accepted a sentence of 65 years as part of a plea deal for the 2016 murder of her husband, Jason, in Hobart.